Hey everyone, today we're talking about what happened after Alexander the Great died and how his huge empire fell into chaos. On June 10, 323 BCE, Alexander died in Babylon, but he didn't leave behind a clear plan for who would rule after him. His empire was massive, stretching across 3 continents, but without a named successor. His top military commanders started fighting among themselves for control. These battles, known as the Wars of the Diadochi, or the Wars of Succession, lasted over 30 years. In the end, 3 powerful dynasties survived, ruling until the rise of the Romans. When Alexander set out on his campaign in 334 BCE, he left Macedonia and Greece under the leadership of Antipater, and led his army across the Hellespont to conquer Persia. After years of fighting, King Darius of Persia was dead, killed by one of his own commanders. Many of Alexander's men wanted to return home, but he had other plans. He ordered that all Greek exiles be allowed to return to their cities, and he started adopting Persian customs. This upset many of his Macedonian soldiers. They were already unhappy about the increasing number of Persians in their army, and they rebelled when Alexander insisted they marry Persian women. Meanwhile, some of the regional governors he had appointed were being executed for treason. Alexander's sudden death made everything worse. Some people, including his mother Olympias, believed he was poisoned in a conspiracy involving his former teacher, Aristotle, and a powerful Macedonian official named Antipater. Others thought he simply became sick after a long night of drinking. Whatever the truth, as he lay dying, Alexander could barely speak. When asked who should rule after him, he supposedly said, "To the best." But since he hadn't named an official successor, his commanders were left to fight over the empire. Without Alexander, there was no central leader. His generals had always been treated as equals, and now that he was gone, none of them could claim to be the rightful ruler without starting a war. There were 2 main candidates: his half-brother Perdiccas, who was already in Babylon, and his unborn child with Roxanne, a princess from Bactria. The problem was that Perdiccas was mentally unfit to rule, and Alexander's child wouldn't be born until later that year. The commanders split into different sides. Some wanted Perdiccas as king, others wanted to wait for Alexander's son, and some just wanted to take land for themselves. Perdiccas, one of Alexander's top generals, supported Roxanne and the unborn baby. If the child became king, Perdiccas could serve as regent and rule in his place. Roxanne, determined to secure her son's position, had Alexander's Persian wife, Stateria, and her sister Drypetis killed and thrown into a well. Meanwhile, the other commanders met to decide who should rule. Some didn't want to wait for Roxanne's baby, and others suggested Alexander's 4-year-old son Heracles from his mistress Barcine, but that idea was rejected. A commander named Meleager led a revolt and declared Perdiccas as King Philip III. He saw Perdiccas as a threat and even tried to have him arrested, but Perdiccas fought back, having Meleager executed in a sanctuary where he had sought safety. This was the beginning of years of brutal conflict. To avoid complete disaster, the generals made a temporary agreement. They decided to wait for the birth of Roxanne's child, and chose guardians to protect both the baby and the newly crowned Philip III. Antipater later took both of them to Macedonia for safety, but by that time it was clear that the empire was breaking apart. From 323 to 281 BCE, Alexander's former generals, who had once fought side by side, waged war over Greece, Macedonia, Asia Minor, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and even parts of India. There were a few moments of peace, but the empire was never reunited. In the end, the only solution was to split it up. The partition of Babylon divided Alexander's empire. Antipater and Craterus took Macedonia and Greece. Ptolemy took Egypt. Lysimachus took Thrace. Eumenes got Cappadocia, and Antigonus the One-Eyed controlled Greater Phrygia. With that, Alexander's empire was officially broken into pieces, ruled by rival kings who continued to fight for power for years to come. His top generals, who were once his trusted commanders, started fighting over who would control different parts of the vast land he had conquered. They made and broke alliances, and no one could trust anyone else for long. Even though some of them managed to claim territory, peace was never an option. The Second Successor War was one of the biggest fights for power. Cassander wanted to rule Macedon, so he forced out his rival Polyperchon and took control of key areas like Piraeus and the Peloponnese. To make his claim to the throne stronger, he married Thessalonica, the daughter of Philip II. Meanwhile, in Asia, Antigonus was gaining more and more power. By 316 BCE, he won a major battle at Gabiene, defeating Eumenes, one of the last leaders still loyal to Alexander's vision. Eumenes was a brilliant military commander, but his own soldiers betrayed him and handed him over to Antigonus. With Eumenes gone, Antigonus became the most powerful ruler in Asia, but his success forced Seleucus to flee from Babylonia to Egypt, where he sought help from Ptolemy. Not long after, the fighting flared up again in the Third Successor War. Once again, alliances shifted, and the struggle for power continued. Seleucus, determined to get back his lost land, teamed up with Ptolemy and launched an attack in 311 BCE. At the Battle of Gaza, Seleucus defeated Antigonus and his son Demetrius, regaining Babylonia. To secure his position, he built a new capital, Seleucia, which later became an important city in the region. At the same time, trouble was brewing in Thrace. Lysimachus had tried to stay out of the wars, but he was dragged in when a city on the Black Sea coast rebelled. Antigonus saw an opportunity and sent his army to cause more problems. By 311 BCE, Lysimachus had taken back control, but now he was fully involved in the larger conflict. He had no choice but to join forces with Cassander, Ptolemy, and Seleucus against Antigonus. Back in Macedon, Cassander was focused on making sure no one could challenge his rule. His biggest threat was Olympias, Alexander the Great's mother. She had teamed up with Polyperchon and was trying to protect her grandson, Alexander IV. Cassander knew that as long as they were alive, people could rally around them to oppose him. In 316 BCE, Olympias made the first move. She had Philip III, her stepson, killed to clear the way for her grandson. Philip III's wife, Eurydice, saw no way out and took her own life. But Olympias had underestimated Cassander. By 310 BCE, he ordered the deaths of both Alexander IV and his mother Roxanne, wiping out Alexander the Great's direct heirs. Olympias was executed soon after. Even in her final moments, she refused to beg for mercy. She met her fate with dignity. And the struggle for power continued. The Fourth Successor War introduced new challenges. Cassander and Ptolemy faced Demetrius, the son of Antigonus, who earned a reputation as the besieger of cities. In 307 BCE, Demetrius invaded Greece, driving out Cassander's governor and taking Athens. By 302 BCE, he revived the League of Corinth, aiming to unite the Greek cities under his leadership. Meanwhile, Ptolemy had been expanding northward and securing Cyprus, but he suffered a major defeat against Demetrius at the Battle of Salamis. Demetrius then turned to Rhodes, launching a massive siege in 305 BCE. However, thanks to Ptolemy, Seleucus, Lysimachus, and Cassander, the Rhodians held out. Eventually, Demetrius agreed to a truce. That same year, the major rulers of Alexander's empire officially declared themselves kings, establishing their independent rule. By 302 BCE, Cassander was struggling to keep Demetrius and Antigonus out of Macedon. Realizing he needed help, he called on his allies. Lysimachus led his forces into Asia Minor, forcing Demetrius to leave Greece and join his father. The final clash happened in 301 BCE at the Battle of Ipsus. Lysimachus, Seleucus, and Cassander fought against Antigonus and Demetrius. Antigonus was killed, and any hope of restoring Alexander's empire was gone. Lysimachus and Seleucus divided the conquered lands. Lysimachus took Asia Minor, while Seleucus claimed Syria and later founded the city of Antioch. Even though Cassander controlled Macedon, he didn't rule for long. He died in 297 BCE, and Demetrius quickly took advantage, seizing control of Macedon and declaring himself king. Meanwhile, Lysimachus was expanding his influence. With Cassander gone, he aimed for Macedon. In alliance with King Pyrrhus of Epirus, he invaded and forced Demetrius out. Demetrius fled to Asia Minor, only to be captured by Seleucus. He spent the rest of his life in captivity and died in 283 BCE, though his descendants would later reclaim Macedon and Greece. The old alliances didn't last. In 282 BCE, Seleucus turned against Lysimachus, aiming to take his territory in Asia Minor. The two armies clashed at the Battle of Curupedium in 281 BCE, where Lysimachus was killed. Seleucus, the general who had once been left with nothing in Babylon, now stood as the last remaining commander from Alexander's time. But his victory was short-lived. Later that year, he was assassinated by Ptolemy Ceraunus, the son of Ptolemy. For over 3 decades, Alexander's former generals had fought bitterly to divide his empire. Their wars were full of shifting alliances, betrayals, and endless battles. In the end, the dream of a single empire died with Alexander, but the wars led to the rise of new dynasties that would shape the Hellenistic world until the rise of Rome.